Well, good morning and welcome to the Vaulting Voices podcast. I am one of your hosts, Justin Akers, pastor of the Upper Room Church in Bastrop, Louisiana, and I am joined with your other host, Dr. Angel Storm, the founder of Ashes to Beauty Ministries and Manifold Mind Life Coaching. Good morning, Angel.
Good morning, Justin. How are you doing?
Very well, and yourself?
Good. Doing well. Excited to be here with you.
All right. Well, last week I was doing a podcast and I was trying to give some announcements and going through everything. And I said, we have the Vaulting Voices podcast coming up. Well, I was thinking it was a few weeks. And then I looked and no, it was this week. So this month has kind of flown by and snuck up on me. So I know you have so much going on right now. So thank you for making the time to do this. And there's been so much happen over the last couple of weeks. So I don't know
Yeah.
where you want to start, just wherever.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that this month kind of snuck up on you. You've been dealing with quite a lot going on in your own self, your own family, your own church, and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, we don't blame you for losing track of time. My goodness. Yeah, you guys have been going through a lot. Um, but yeah, you did the podcast last week and you did and your message on Sunday this week were both so good. And what I liked about them were you were talking both of them included a number of topics, but one of the things that you talked about in both of those is the the battle readiness of getting battle ready. Like, it's time that there's a warrior bride arising, and this is what you were talking about essentially in both of your podcast last week Friday and your message on Sunday. And I that just so resonates with me. Like, it is time to be done, not really like kind of like woe was me, or this like weak mindset that ends up being a lifestyle that people get sucked into whenever there is an attack that comes. And watching the way that you handled not only your own illness, but seeing how it was affecting so many people in your church and your own family, your own house, and seeing the way that you handled that was such a testament to what you actually believe, and seeing that there's no disconnect between what you believe and what you actually do, right? Like, faith should look like something, right? That's what it says. You can judge my faith by my works. And
Mm-hmm.
that was something that I really liked that you were speaking about. Like, this trial, the trials that we face, and especially right now, this time right now, is so important that we start walking out, implementing what we believe into actions, that this stuff looks like something. And you did such a good job of that over this past month. Honestly, all of the time, but especially when it's so hard, when there's some kind of thing trying to attack your body, trying to make you not be able to go do the stuff that you want to be able to go do. And not only you, but like I said, your household, somebody has to, take care of the house, and you're a pastor of a church, and somebody has to do all of that stuff as well. And you never changed your beliefs, you never changed your mindset, you never changed your actions about any of that, even through all of this. And we've been talking over the past month, and I said, it sucks that you're having to go through this. Like, it's absolutely demonic. This is not like, oh, it's a trial sent by God. No, it isn't. It's completely demonic. This is an attack of the enemy for sure. But the way that you handled it was so encouraging. And I think the people who go to your church, who call you pastor, and the people who call you friend, the people who know you, should be so proud of the way that you handled this situation, because there was such an attack going on, and yet you never changed any of your behaviors or your statements or your faith at all.
And I think that's something that that we really as a church need to get to, is the belief in our heart and standing firm in what we
Mm,
believe.
mm,
I never questioned the validity or the realness of this virus, of the coronavirus.
mm,
I never
mm,
doubted if it was real. I do question
mm,
where it came from. And I definitely question the governmental handling of this, but I've never
Mhm.
questioned the seriousness and the severity. I mean, you have one person that can get it, and they may have a cold for a couple of days, and you have another one, and it costs them their life. I mean, one of
Yeah.
our a gentleman that just won a seat in Congress in the last election. 41 years old. He's literally 6 weeks older than me, and he passed away of this. And which, by the way, his wife ran for office right after to replace him, and she won. But I mean, you
Mm.
just can't tell what's going to happen. So, no, my views have not changed on any of it.
Mhm.
Not the power of God to move through it,
Mm.
not our
Mm.
authority over it, not the
Mhm.
effectiveness of the protocols that the government tries to implement. None of that has changed. And our church has been so faithful. They have been so strong. Most everyone is either fully recovered or mostly recovered. We do have two people that we are still fighting for, very, very strong, that are in serious condition. But yeah, the church needs to be ready for war. When things like this happen, it should not catch us off guard and cause us to panic and cause us to shrink back. These are the times, man, when the attack comes that we have to stand up like a David to a Goliath.
Mhm.
You know, David was just a shepherd boy, but righteous indignation rose up in him. As soon as he heard Goliath spewing hate toward the army of Israel, there was something in him that was the Spirit of God, but the Spirit of God rose up on him, and he just literally just was enraged. And then he asked him, he says, "Is there not a cause? Why are we doing this? Is there not a cause for us?" And I think the church needs to stand up and say,
Mm.
"Is there not a cause?" We are literally on the cusp of the greatest move of God we have ever seen. And it's not like Satan's going to sit back and go, "Oh, the church is awakening. I guess I lost. I'm going to go home now." No, he's going to fight
Mhm.
everything he can. Every church, every minister, every individual, every powerful believer, he's going to fight every one of us, and we need to be ready for battle.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. And one of the things that I remember you saying, I think it was a couple weeks ago now, and I think you've said it before too, but it's a good reminder is that David was willing to fight God's battles, and so therefore God fought his battles. David took up the cause of the Lord, and so therefore the Lord came through as his defender, as his warrior in his personal battles. And that's something too that we kind of hit on this a little bit last time that we had our podcast, which is that we have a lot of self-focused believers, right? Like, oh, this is happening. God must be angry. I must have done something. There's must be a reason that God is sending this to me or allowing this to happen to me, and not realizing, the greatest lie that I think the devil has gotten people to believe is that they aren't powerful, and literally people are believing this everywhere. Like, I'm not powerful. Who am I? God must hate me, and so he's sending this thing to me, when it's really an attack of the enemy, because he's hitting on something that you will accelerate. You will cause other people to have breakthrough in that area. You're a carrier of something, and he doesn't want you to spread that thing. For y'all, no doubt about it, you guys are called to healings and great healing miracles. And so no wonder that he's going to come and try you. So you were talking to me about this. You have about 50 or 55 people that are going to church right now, and out of that amount of people, you had like 30 people nearly who got sick in one time. This
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like over the past year. This is like right now at one time. And the percentage of that, it just doesn't make sense that all of those
Mm-hmm.
people would, right, at one time. And so it's, instead of thinking like, oh, God hates us and is giving us this virus or is giving us this sickness, it's like, thank you, devil. You just showed me the place where I'm the strongest, where God wants to move through me and spread the healing miracles all around. And I actually saw that for your church, that the people who would partner and understand like what is happening and grow during this battle would actually be like the releasers. Their faith would cause great healings and great miracles to happen through your church. And And I think that that's the heart of the Lord. There's always going to be a
Mhm.
reward for going into battle. There's always spoils.
Exactly. And I think that we're crushing the enemy's head, and I think the spoils of this battle are great. I want to take off on something here because
Yeah.
you referenced something at the very beginning, and then you said something just a moment ago. So let me give three different aspects of problems in the church right now. Number one,
Mm.
which is your specialty, is narcissism. We have narcissistic believers. Number two is self centeredness, which is
Hmm.
not the same thing, closely associated, but not the same thing. And number three is the
Hmm.
victims. And these are three very huge weaknesses within the church. Now, you deal with narcissistic abuse recovery. You are a narcissist specialist, if you will. So you can see that within the church, even in the way people approach God. From a narcissistic
Hmm.
approach, you can see how so much of the church has become very self-centered. It's all about me. It's what can God do for me? It's what can the church do for me? It's I'm here to be served. And then we have this the victim side where someone is always the victim. If something happens, then it's because God did it or because someone else did it. And I love how James addresses this in James chapter 1. He is rebuking the people for blaming God for the bad things in their life. And he says, you don't understand. God does not tempt you with evil because he cannot be tempted with evil. All good things, not some, all good things come from God. So we've got to get this balance back in the church and understand that, number one, God is a God that judges, but he's a good God, and he does not judge righteousness. He does not,
Hmm.
his wrath does not come against the righteous. Number two,
Hmm.
this world, we are sent here, we are purposed with a commission, with a mission and a commission of God. So it's not all about us. So I'll throw that out there and let you take off however you want to go with that one.
Yeah, no, I think that that's such a good point. We talked about this the last time. Like, it's ridiculous if I'm in the natural military and I get offended because there's another form of an enemy, another combatant who's trying to take the thing that I want. I'm not taking that personally. I understand that I'm acting on behalf of something bigger and
Mhm.
that it's actually the thing behind me, right? The country behind me, the principles of the country behind me that they're after. And the same situation here. It's a good indicator of the lack of relationship and the prevalence of religion. If you're in a
That's
relationship with
good.
somebody that you love so much, I love this country so much. It's the best one. I love it. So the, there is not you can't make me offended. You can't make me offended at this country because of the warfare that I might sustain because I'm actively defending this country. You're not going to make me offended. I love this country. I'm happy to say it. Same thing. Like if I love God, so I'm happy to stand in between the you talked about this in your message on Sunday too. The war that's happening between the first and the third heavens,
Hmm.
which take place in the second heaven. And we see the outcome of that war on earth in the first heaven, good and bad. We
Hmm.
see it all the time. The effects of what is happening in the second heaven come to the earth all of the time. We see it all of the time. I'm not going to be offended because I see the the result of something that is happening somewhere else when I am in such a deep relationship with somebody that I know is good. It's only when I have rules that tell me you have to do this and it's not coming from a place of love. Like it's my honor to do whatever God would have me do on earth, and I don't mean that in a way of like it's oh, you're going to have to suffer, you're going to have to do this, although I do think that that is part of it.
Yeah.
The word says pick up your cross. I wonder why Jesus didn't say like, pick up all of your Macy's bags or like some kind of like fun thing. He said pick up your cross and follow me. So I think that suffering is a natural part of what comes because of that war.
Hmm.
And until the whole earth looks like heaven, then we're going to we're going to continue to have negative side effects of war. My point being, it's a really good indicator that we've got a lot of people who are preaching love, but they're actually in religion.
Mm-hmm.
They're preaching relationship, but they're actually in religion. They have rules, and they believe like, I was good, and so therefore I should be rewarded with good. I obeyed all of the things that you had out for me, right? I'm the rich young ruler. I've obeyed all of the commandments even since birth. So what kind of reward do you have for me? Instead of it being about relationship and understanding that there's highs and lows, there's good places and bad places, there's things that have to get worked out in any type of relationship. It's not always going to be just awesome, no problems, everything is great, and everybody loves your relationship, right? That's the other thing too, is recognizing that not everybody loves that you're in relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just based on that principle alone, there's going to be warfare.
Yeah, there was a fairy tale sold to the church years ago that everything was rainbows and butterflies after you get saved. And that leaves a lot of people disillusioned when things begin to happen. And it does create this mentality of, okay, if this is happening, what have I done? Why is God angry with me? And there are times, I don't want to give this disclaimer real quick. There are times we open the doors. You know, if we open the door, if we allow the enemy an inroad in, for example, if I have witchcraft in my home, then I can't, get mad because the enemy's attacking me. I've let him in. A friend of mine posted on Facebook this morning, you can't be the bride of Christ and the girlfriend of Satan. Matter of fact,
So good.
you had a dream this week, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this part.
No, yeah, please.
But in your dream, you saw these demonic entities, and there were times when the believer was empowered over them, but there was a time that the believer was not, because they were affiliated. They had some of that same sin in their life, so therefore they had no power. So, and I think this is a lot of what's happened in the church. The church has been powerless in this past season. I don't want to say powerless. Restricted. The church has been restricted in power in this past season because the church has allowed so many things in of the world. So we're dipping from the same pot, if you will, and we have to move back to the righteousness and the holiness. It's not about religion. You're so right. It's not about what I can do on the outside to make me look right. It's about what I can do on the inside to make me right. It's okay, so Scripture compares our relationship with the Lord as a marriage. I don't not abuse my wife because it's against the law. I don't not abuse her because I love her. I don't provide for my children because it's the expectation or because someone might see it and they'll see me provide for my children. I provide for my children, and my wife and I will sacrifice ourselves for the provision of our children because we love our babies. And this is that's relationship. It has nothing to do with the outward appearance. The outward appearance is the byproduct. You and I both love to go to the gym. So, I can put on my gym clothes and I can walk around and I can take my pre-workout or my protein shake or whatever and walk around with it and act like I've done something, but it means absolutely nothing unless I've actually been to the gym. But I can also have a faithful life at the gym and no one ever see it, but they will see the results because it happens in private. It happens because of relationship. So you can come to church, you can do all the religious things, but if your heart is not seeking the Lord, then you're going to remain powerless. You're going to remain impotent in that warfare. And God's looking for a people that will break free of the old things, break free of narcissism, break free of self-centeredness, break free of the victimization, and stop and realize that we serve the God who created the heavens and the earth. We serve the God that literally looked at nothing and breathed something. Every time he speaks, it creates. Every time he looks at me or looks at you or looks at anyone and says something, it literally creates. So when we are seeking the Lord for the prophetic word, week before last, it was on a Saturday night. I was trying to get ready for Sunday morning, and literally I was exhausted. I was sick. I was weak, and I was sitting in my office, and I was like, I've got to go home. I can't. And I had no notes. I literally had a couple words on the paper, and so I put my computer down and my Bible up, and I get it all in my computer bag, and I felt almost like I did not even know if I could drive 10 minutes home. I mean, I was just sick, and I stopped and I said, God, you're always faithful. So I know you'll meet me in the morning. And I get in my vehicle and I'm headed home, and you text me that night. And you said, hey, I was praying for you. And the Lord, I felt like the Lord spoke to me. All you have to do is show up. And I
Mhm.
kind of laughed when I saw it. And I was like, well, now if I can get home, maybe I can show up tomorrow. So the next morning I get out early, and I was still so sick, and literally I had nothing. And I was praying, and the Lord gave me a title. And so I came in here and got ready to, we were live streaming the service. And I don't remember much about the service, about the live stream. I was just literally, I was very, very sick. And then I get home, and I start getting texts and phone calls with people saying that what a great message, that hit right what I needed right now. You text me later that day and said, oh my goodness, this may be the best message of the year. And I'm thinking, was I even there? But my point is, God released a prophetic word, said, show up.
Mhm.
That was my victory. So when God releases that prophetic word, that word creates. And when this is what Jehoshaphat said, obey the Lord and you'll be established. Listen to his prophets and you'll have good success. So when we hear that prophetic word, that is God speaking. So we serve the God who literally, when he speaks, it creates whatever he speaks. We are not weak. We are not
Yeah.
undergoers. Satan is not bigger. God is the one. Job says, God's talking to Job, and he says, I put Leviathan on a leash and I walk him like a dog. I can put him in the yard with my children and he knows better than to do anything because I'm right there. I mean, this is the God we serve. We are not weak in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form, and we've got to break free of the victimized mentality, the poor me, and oh, God don't hear my prayers. God does hear our prayers. He hears your prayers. He hears
Mhm.
my prayers. He listens to us. So we've got to break free of that little me mentality and understand we have the ear of God Almighty.
Mhm. Justin, that's so good. And your message that week, which was 2 Sundays ago, I believe
Hmm.
now, it was so good. Like that was like I said, I feel like that was easily your best message of the year. And I think that first of all, I've been having this word just show up for a lot of people. Like somebody will call me, or even one of my clients will tell me some kind of thing that's going on, and I just hear like we're getting ready to see God, the defender, of the
Hmm.
church. Those people who are willing to stay until the very end, stand until the very end. God is showing up in mighty ways for these people because they've been faithful. Like they have done everything that God has asked them to do in a relationship, not out of religion, not out of "Oh, I got to do this thing. Um and it isn't because there isn't any kind of thing that we can do to earn anything from God. It's already been done
Hmm.
for us. Relationship, brings the blessings. Like if somebody's in a fake relationship with me, I'm not going to want to share stuff with them. I'm not going to want to do stuff with them, right? And it's the same with God. He's looking for that very authentic relationship. And when it is real, he does come through. And when I gave you that word about just show up, it was like Moses who like literally just showed up to Pharaoh all of the time and like was like, "Hey, let my people go." Every single time, nothing kind of happened, and he didn't even want to go there, and he gave God a whole bunch of excuses. Well, it turns out he didn't really even need to do much. He just needed to show up. And the same thing with the Red Sea. All he had to do was just show up there, right? And stretch out his staff, and God did the rest of the work. And so it really is like having this relationship of I know I can't do it, and then that's when I know that my God will come through for me. I know that when I show up and I say I can't do it and I'm crying out to my dad, he comes to help me. That there's going to be breakthrough because I've exactly, I've listened to the word of the prophets. I'm going to have great success. God can't help but to do what he said to do. He can't not have his word do what he said it would do. So, like I said, I just thought like the whole, I understand like, so, people don't see the back end of things oftentimes, right? And me, myself included, we just show up to church and we go to church and you don't recognize what has gone into making that sermon happen, making that service happen, all of this kind of stuff. It wasn't until I really started to spend some time at my church with my pastor during the daytime where I was like, okay, this is crazy. Like the amount of stuff pastors do. I was like, who's like, oh, I would like to do that, like this is this is like clearly like a call from the Lord, because there's no way, like no one would ever be like, yep, that's for me. Most people just show up and like are there for like the 2-hour thing on Sunday and then that's it. And there is so much that goes into it. It's like this, like what I was just saying, you were sick in your body, you were weak in your body, you were trying to continue to do your routine, and Saturday night for you is your routine of meeting with the Lord and seeing what he would have you release for the next day during this sermon, and nothing was happening in your routine. Like you were pushing your body to show up at that time, and that's when you found your limits.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything else. Like I've tried, I can't do it. God help me. And God absolutely gave you the best sermon. Like I said, easily this year, for sure, easily your best sermon. And it's amazing. Like all you have to do is to trust him that he's going to show up when you're that weak. When you're in a relationship, there's no question about, like, if you needed your wife to do something, that you would call her and of course she's going to show up. Same thing with your mom too. Like you were telling me how your mom called you and said she had a flat tire, and of course you go to help your mom. There is no question about whether or not that would happen. And there's a lot of people who think that they're in relationship with God, but when they actually examine what they believe, they don't believe God will come through for them. Mm-hmm. They believe it's for somebody else, but not for them. There's a disconnect there that has to get fixed. And you were talking about this even in your message on Sunday, like you've bondoed the wall instead of actually building up the breach. Instead of building it for real, you're trying to look for like the duct tape, of like, oh, that'll do it, and this is a relationship with the person who made you. Like, why would you not want to really invest in that and nurture that relationship above all else,
Hey, duct tape fixes everything, right? So
is there duct tape in heaven?
Yeah, probably not. So that is how we look at things. Is the easy fix, the quick fix? Let's cover it up, sweep something under the rug. Let's, Good. Several people. I was keeping track of everybody, right? So everyone who was sick, I'm trying to keep up with their treatment, what they're doing, and so forth. Most of them would go to the doctor, and the clinics would give them a cough syrup and a couple things just to treat the symptoms. Very few places actually looked and said, let's address the problem. COVID-19 is the problem. Coronavirus is the problem. So let's do something to treat the problem. They didn't. They were only treating the symptoms. And this is the mentality that we have, is to treat symptoms. Symptoms come, symptoms go. Even if the symptoms go, that doesn't mean that the problem is gone. We've got to address the problem. We've got to get to the root of something, especially spiritually. Good. I think that we're at a place where God is his patience is running thin, is the best way that I can feel it with me. He's looking at the church and he's like, we've got a war to fight. I'm about to release my spirit, but I've got a church that's not ready to receive my spirit. Don't forget the world right now, because I've got to fix my church so that they can handle what I'm about to release so that the world can
Mhm.
be impacted. But the church, if the church is still bound by being a victim, if they're still bound by just trying to fix symptoms, if they're bound by this narcissistic behavior, this all about me, 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 if the church
Mhm.
is bound in these areas or even in the weakness, there are so many good, God loving people. They love God. They are sincere, but they still have that victim mentality. Maybe it's their past. Maybe it's how they were raised. Maybe it's where they were raised. Maybe it's just
Mhm.
the way that life has done them. They've experienced so much bad that Satan has
Mhm.
programmed this way. Well, we have to deprogram and reprogram. We've got to get rid of the way that
Mhm.
the enemy and life has programmed us. It's like you were talking the other day about a minister that was in town, and they were so shocked that your church didn't have all of the protocols that they're used to, and you were like, you've spent 60 years of your life understanding freedom. You've spent 1 year of your life being deprogrammed from that, and literally 1 year has erased 60 years of understanding. Well, we in the church, we need to have the power and the Spirit of God to erase this victimized mentality or this self-centered. You have some people that have just been spoiled their whole lives, and then they come into church and they're ready for God to spoil them. God doesn't serve us. We serve God. And so if we can
Mhm.
find this balance and really learn to enter into the presence of the Lord, it was in Zechariah chapter 3 or 4. He says, it's not by your might, it's not by your power, it's by my spirit. So when we come into the presence
Mhm.
of the Lord and realize that this life is not all about me, God will bless us, He will favor us, He will pour things out on us, but it's not about me. Those are byproducts of a relationship and of a purpose. So when the church sees that we have a purpose, which is to bring forth the kingdom, the rule, and the reign of heaven into the earth today, we are the ecclesia, we are the governing body. The church should be a very powerful force in America. Our politicians should seek the approval of the
Yes.
church, but instead we have politicians that are trying to shut down the church. The church should be such a powerful entity that it's not capitulating to every idea of society, but literally the governors say, look, we're thinking about bringing forth this legislation, but we need to know what the church thinks about this first, because we know it won't
Mhm.
pass without the church's approval. That's the way it should be. And so the church has got to break free of our bondages so that we can come together as the ecclesia and truly begin to see the kingdom of heaven come forth.
Justin, wow, you said so much in that. And not only is not only should politicians be seeking the approval of the church, but right now what we've got is churches trying to seek the approval of politicians, which
Yes.
which is just unreal. Oh, okay, is this good? Is this good with you? Like, if we do this, is this fine? Like, are you serious? This is the house of the Lord. You're a manager of the house of the Lord. You should never let you have one boss. you know. Um I was at church training. I did some training at my church this past weekend, and one of the things one of the things that the instructor there was talking about was in Texas, they 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 don't want to have any homeless children. So they don't want to have any foster children. They don't want to have any orphans in Texas. And this is possible if every single church in Texas would adopt one child. If one
Wow.
child would go to, yeah, we have so many churches down here that this is the case. And so what the politicians have done, what the state legislation of Texas has done, has partnered with the Assembly of God church down here to try to get this initiative moving. And they actually asked them, family, how do we fix families? And this is what the
Wow.
Assembly of God church told them. You start making this and supporting churches adopting children. And if every church in Texas adopts one child, you'll have no more homeless children, no more foster children, and every child will have a home. And
That's
so this
amazing.
this is Yeah, isn't that an incredible story? So Oklahoma is trying to do the same thing right now, by the way. They have a similar situation where they have enough churches that if every church would adopt one child. And by the way, Texas, Houston specifically, where I am, has the biggest church in the northern
Hmm.
hemisphere. Right? We have, and there's many, many, many mega churches here in Texas as a whole. But anyway, so you think about if maybe that church could take 5 or 10 children,
Hmm.
but anyway, yes, so this should be the norm. The evidence of the kingdom should be so real and so like obvious, so visible to even unbelievers that it's like, you know what, they're doing something real good over here. What we need to do is consult with them about, we got some big problems here in the state, we got some big problems in the country. What we need to do is to go over there where they're doing it right. Let's get their advice. The reason Elon Musk is winning contracts for the government right now is because he's doing it better than the government can. Like, why is one guy who's an unbeliever winning billion-dollar contracts when we should have the mind of Christ, and we are literally the governmental body of the Lord on earth?
Yep.
Why is this one guy? And by the way, I love Elon, so this isn't a like, I like, he's got such a outside of the box mind. He's got a brilliant mind. So I really honor that. My point here is just saying, we've got one guy changing the
Hmm.
world with his own ideas. Okay, he's literally showing the government how to do it better than the thing that they've been doing. And in fact, started, like, they were the groundbreakers of space exploration as we know it. This one guy who's been on Earth for like 50 years is like, let me show you how to do it way better. And like, this is evident. This should be like this for sure motivates me. This should be motivating to the church of saying, like,
Yes.
if this one guy can do it, what happens when I have, Jesus says, if two or three are gathered together in my name, this, why are we not having two or three people come together? You know what, we got a big problem in this state. What we need to do is get 2 and 3 people together and pray in the Lord's name that this thing
Yep.
gets fixed right now. This should be a normal lifestyle. This shouldn't, we shouldn't be waiting until crises, by no means, to like get together and do stuff. But my point being, like, we there's a huge gap of like
There is.
where we are and where we should be.
There is a massive gap there. And okay, so you're talking about Elon Musk. This man is brilliant. And by the way, he's not a fan of the current administration. Um,
Yep, that's right.
been
He
highly
done moved his
critical.
base. Yeah, he moved everything out of California. He's in Austin now,
I didn't know he moved
outside of
to.
Austin.
I knew there was discussion that he would be moving to Texas, but I didn't know that he actually had done that.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
he sure did.
But you're
Yep.
right. Why is it not a spirit-filled believer doing that?
Right.
You and I have discussed at length at times about doing things with the spirit of excellence. And so we need
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
understand. Okay, Jeremiah 29:11 says that God knew us before we were formed in the womb, or 1:5, excuse me. And then in 29:11 he says, "I know the thoughts that I think towards you, for good and not evil." The word thoughts means something that is woven, and to think means to weave. So if God literally
Hmm.
wove inside of me the very fabric of who I am, that means that the giftings and the talents that I have were woven there by God for purpose. The giftings and talents you have are woven there by God for purpose. So whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a school teacher, whether you're a bank manager or a business manager or a self-employed business owner, whatever it is, when we understand that this is a gifting that God has knitted inside of me, He's woven inside of me. So let's do it with excellence, not excellence that is measured by the world standard, but what is God's excellence in this realm? What is God's purpose for me in the field that I'm in, and see the kingdom of heaven, see the rule and the reign of heaven. Man, what if our teachers did that? Now we have a spirit-filled teacher in our church, and she's a powerhouse. And And so she prays over her children. We have one teacher that is actually retired now,
Come on.
and she would just walk around her students and pray for them. And she has asked God through the years for a return on that. And she's, to this day, she's been retired for a few years. To this day, she has her students call her and contact her, Facebook her, still asking her questions about the Lord. I mean, we have divine purpose no matter what field we're in, and we need to understand that in order to bring freedom, we have to be free. So if we break free of the things around me, then I can be a better pastor. I can be a better parent. I can be a better husband. I can be all of these things. We can begin to see a spirit of excellence, because I don't think I don't think that Elon Musk is the only one that can have these great ideas. I don't think that YouTube should be our only avenue of these type videos. Matter of fact, you posted something to Facebook I saw right before we started. I'll let you share that. I don't even. I feel like that's like fake news, you know.
Literally like fake news. So YouTube holds its own conference, its own ceremony about who's the best at free speech, and gives its own self the free speech award. Like,
I have so many comments on that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, like, oh, this is it, although it's crazy, it's kind of like, you know what? Like, this is apparently the world we're living in now.
It
like,
is.
I need yes, like there, by the way, I just want to quickly point out, there is many of these types of ceremonies in lots of communist states in the past. They would give them own selves awards based on like these, oh man, it's just, so anyway, this is where it's going. But you're exactly right. Like, why did somebody else not get already a better platform?
Yes.
Like, why do we not already have another platform that's not owned by Amazon, okay, and that they can't take down whenever they feel like it because they don't like what's being said on it, like they did with that other app? You remember?
Yeah.
Parler.
Okay, so they did that with Parler, but then YouTube, who gives themselves this free speech award, literally bans President Trump from even being able to have an account. So does Twitter, so does Facebook. So all of these free speech places, all of these platforms that we have, that you can put whatever kind of filth you want, whatever kind of demonic content, you can put it all day long. But when it's the voice that they don't like, when it's a voice that they disagree with, then their free speech is now protected speech, where they want to protect everyone else.
You know, what's really interesting too is that, so in 2000, I want to say like 17, 18, there was a lawsuit brought to the Supreme Court because President Trump at the time had blocked, like, what's her name? Chrissy Teigen, from his Twitter. He blocked her on Twitter, and she sued him saying that you can't block one of your constituents. And this escalated up to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they ruled and said that ruling stands. You cannot block somebody who, when you're in public office, you can't block somebody even if they send you harassing tweets or whatever. That's part of the thing. But what's interesting is that the opposite also like, we already had a Supreme Court case on this. How is the opposite also not true? That you can't just ban somebody who's held not only public office, but who's been a president. You know, we've only had 45 of these. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and very few of them have been alive during internet times. So why is the opposite also not true when we already had a Supreme Court ruling on this? So there's lots of things like this where right now we're just in such a time where it's very tumultuous, you know, politically, and that affects communication abilities, right? Like we're talking about, somebody could get banned or deleted or canceled or any kind of thing these days. Why did not somebody like start? And I mean, I guess I should look at myself too, because I didn't, but why didn't somebody start seeking the Lord and say, God, you are the God of all things. I want to take back territory in the second heaven. The prince of the air is not gonna have any influence over my voice, which is coming from, I'm speaking out your words, God. Give me an idea. Show me a way. What's the platform? What's the next thing? Give me a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can establish this, that the enemy cannot touch. But there isn't such a thing invented yet. Like, why?
We should be on the cutting edge of everything.
Every single thing.
My parents actually started our church in 1986. So my dad would preach a message on Sunday that did not align with the current. I don't want to say did not align. It was not in the same vein as what most of the churches were preaching. And then he would go get a newsletter from David Wilkerson that would come in the mail that week, and David Wilkerson would be ministering the same thing. That was the cutting edge of the prophetic right there. We need to be on the cutting edge of the prophetic. We need to be on the cutting edge of education. We need to be on the cutting edge of science. We need to be on the cutting edge of business. We need to be on the cutting edge of all of this. And right now we have leaders that are literally, it's like a bunch of kindergartners writing the rules with crayons. I mean, they're making the rules up as they go. They're changing the rules as they want. So when a law is put into place, that law must be interpreted, which is the judicial side, especially with the Supreme Court is supposed to interpret the Constitution. And then we have the executive branch that is supposed to execute this. Well, right now we have people in the highest places. So there is misinterpretation, lack of interpretation, and there's no one to execute. There's no one to actually carry out the rules that are there, which is, I mean, just my opinion, that's why we have a president that we do right now, because we did not see the rules properly administered to begin with, and we saw an election hijacked right before us. But the problem with humanity or the human nature is we adapt. So when something happens, we get upset and we mouth off about it, but then we adapt and we begin to accept that this is just the way it is. Well, I'm not accepting that this is the way it is. Right now, Canada, which is supposed to be a free nation, is under some of the most harsh religious persecution they've ever been under. It's not going to stay in Canada. It's coming to America. It's already begun. And you said earlier that with Scripture tells us that we will endure persecutions for the sake of Jesus Christ. And so that is a reality of something that's coming. There is a time that there will be great persecutions. But I believe that we're in the time just before those great persecutions. I believe that this is a wake-up call that God is literally screaming to his church, see how fragile your freedoms are. See how fragile your liberties are. Because right now, God is needing, he's desiring the church to take her place in this great move. I believe that we're fixing to come into a time of the harvest of souls. And the church has got to break free of all of this. And we need to realize that what's happening in our government is happening because the church allowed it to. The church did not stop it. And we need a church that will stop it.
Absolutely. You know, my pastor did a sermon about this a few weeks ago where he talked about, he said, if you see something you don't like happening in your life, in society, in your family, in the government, any place that you see something that you don't like, it's your fault. You're part of the church. You should have stopped it. It's your lack of passion for that thing to see kingdom come into that area that has allowed that breach to happen. And that is absolutely true. You know, if your house is getting robbed and then you're like, well, I left the front door open and all my windows were open, but you know what? They shouldn't be trespassing. Okay, they shouldn't be trespassing, but they're robbers. So why are you surprised when robbers are doing what robbers are doing? And you knew better that you should lock your doors and close your windows. You left everything open and then you're upset that the robbers are robbing you. They're doing what a robber does. There's not enough. It goes back to that victim thing. Somebody else's fault. I'm not going to take any responsibility. And when you talk about adapting, what's interesting is that we're talking about devolution. We're not
Yes.
talking about adapt and overcome. We're talking about devolution into
Yes.
the easiest way. Okay, it's easier for me to get along, with whatever somebody's saying. And these same people, by the way, are saying like, okay, I'll just do whatever because the government told me to. Like, by the way, like I believe in honor and respect for the government and the institutions and things like that. We can't have chaos like we've seen over this past year and a half now of people just climbing over all of the statues, try the Capitol
Hmm.
thing, all of the stuff. We can't have that. That's like no, we see that in developing countries. We don't see that in the leader of the free world country. So we can't have that. I believe in honor for the government and all of that. But when a government is telling you to do something, you know what? God told me, why don't you ask me? That's what he said to me when all of this stuff was first starting about people need to stay in their house and then people needed to wear a mask if they were going outside and all this kind of stuff. He said, why don't you ask me what I want you to do? That's what he told me.
Hmm.
Why is he not the first? This should be true in every area of our life.
Yeah.
We've given up the number one seat to somebody else. And
Hmm.
then we wonder, why is everything looking so crazy? It's like, well, you might have had something to do with it.
Yeah. We'll go to social media and complain about it. Matter of fact, I mean,
Yeah.
Facebook at times, I'm very limited how much I get on Facebook anymore.
Hmm.
I like to
Yeah.
wish happy birthdays because I like for people to enjoy their special day,
Mm.
and I want them to know that I care.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
like to look that up, and I'll scroll through for a minute, and
Uh-huh.
then it becomes complaining and griping and complaining, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. Yeah, this is too much for me. It's too heavy. So
Yes.
now, let me clarify something here. I don't mind addressing real issues. I don't mind looking at the real problem. But just to
Mm.
see everybody complaining about this, that, and another, and people, you said it much better. It is a de-evolution because they adapt to the negative. They adapt to the
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm.
They'll still complain about it, but there's no change. During the American Revolution, they would go from city to city, from village to village, from place to place, and they would try to get these guys to rise up and join the Revolutionary Army. And only a handful of any place would actually stand up and say, "We can't take this anymore." And thank the
Yeah.
Lord that God moved on these young men that actually did stand up and become the American revolutionaries. Where would we be had they not done that? So there's always going to be a remnant. Unfortunately, it's always going to be a remnant. But God's
Mhm.
had me really stuck in Gideon's army the last couple of weeks. And Gideon's army, the first set, they were going up against this massive army who was feared because they had the ironworks, they had these big iron chariots, and they were just this massive militant. And Israel was a group of farmers, basically. And so they're going up against this massive army. God moves on Gideon. Gideon was actually in hiding. God calls him a man of valor. So then he releases a statement to all the tribes, come out and join me in war. 33,000 show up. And to me, if I was looking at an army of 33,000, and I can't remember what they were going up against, either 100,000 or 300,000, and God tells him, tell everyone who's scared, go home. Gideon's probably thinking, does that mean me too? So, and then it goes down to 10,000. And then he takes them out to see those that were actually knew war. They knew how to war. They understood warfare. And he's left with 300. And then God says, now I can do something with this because I want everyone to know it's not by their strength, but this is the Spirit
Yeah.
of God that does this. This is the power of God that does this. And this is so powerful to me because I think God's looking at his church today and he's looking and he sees this remnant. He sees this group of people that are so on fire and so impassioned. They've been sick, but they believe in healing. They've prayed for people to be healed and watched them die, but they still believe that God heals. They've seen people die in their addictions, but they still believe that God sets people free. They've seen things go opposite of what we know is possible by the power of God, and yet they still believe, and they're still hungry, and they're still fired up, and they're still impassioned. And God's looking at that remnant church. Maybe it's a church of 5 over here, a church of 50 over there, a church of 500 somewhere else.
Yes.
The numbers are not relevant. The numbers are God can do more with one than we could ever do with 10,000 or 10 million. So he's looking at this remnant and he's saying, that one's on fire. That one's on fire. That one's, oh, look at that church over there. See, Satan looks at that church and he sees God moving. And he says, I'm going to destroy that church because God's doing something there. So the devil attacks. And then when we feel the attack come, if we bow back and say, oh, the warfare is too much, then that's our choice. That's our weakness, because defeat only comes if we let it come, when we are operating by the direction and the power of God, because God can't be defeated. So as long as we don't let the enemy defeat, Satan cannot rob you of your promise. He wants to, but he cannot steal it from your hands as long as you hold on to it. As long as you cleave to your promise, as long as you hold tightly, he can't take it out of your hand. The only way he has access is when we give a breach in the wall, when we allow unrighteousness to come in, when we allow something to come in. That's the only time Satan ever has any realm of authority in your life. Other than that, he's like the big bad wolf. He can huff and he can puff, but he cannot blow your house down, because your house is built on the rock of Jesus Christ and is covered by the blood of Jesus and is surrounded by the angels of heaven. That's the power that we need to understand.
That is so good, Justin. Do you remember one time, I think you had a dream about all of these like little fires that were started like all around. There were like little fires all around. You know that's visible in the spirit realm to all of it. So like both angels and the devils can see that there's some fires. And for some people, when it attracts the demonic to them, it is like dirt being put on the fire. So it's gonna make it be put out. And to some people, it's fuel. To some people, it makes them burn brighter. It makes them go deeper into God. It makes them go deeper into the purpose of God. And like it becomes so big that it just can't be put out. That fire just can't be put out. And that's exactly what I was seeing with y'all's church and every kind of thing that was happening with you guys this past month or so, where there's so many people where this past year and a half, right? They got on board real quick. They figured out what was going on. They adapted in a positive way to what was happening and let that become their fuel for them, become kindling for them. Like the things that needed to get burnt up really quick for them. And those people aren't going to be stopped now. This season is like their rewarding season, because they were willing to stay in that fire. It was literally themselves that was in the fire, that was set on fire, that was lit up, that was the one to stand even while things were hot and more things were getting put on you. And it's like very, 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 very bright and hot fire. But that is until you get to that place, you don't get into the reward.
Yes. And your church went through something very similar back 4 or 5 months ago. A very disproportionate attack of the enemy. And so you're right, our response comes down to what's in our heart. So if there's, it reveals exactly. So the fire of the Holy Spirit, when it comes, or the fire of adversity, when fire comes, it's going to consume anything that can be consumed, and it's going to expose the things that are not consumed. So when a fire of adversity comes, it will expose the facade that we put on. So our fake faith will be exposed very quickly. Our religious attitudes are exposed very quickly. Our anger, our unforgiveness, all of these things, it gets exposed real quick. But our real faith, so faith, according to Hebrews 11:1, is the substance of something hoped for. It is something substantiable. It is something real. And this is where our
Yes.
faith is seen. Our faith is seen when we go through a hard time and we still believe. It's when we respond to the attack of the enemy with boldness and with faith. It's the difference in between being a Saul or a David. Saul feared the people,
Wow.
but David feared God.
That's good,
Saul did
Justin.
everything to get his acceptance from people, but David didn't care. David's the one that danced before the Lord, and when his own wife made fun of him and was embarrassed by him, he basically divorced her right there. He had nothing to do with her
Mhm.
for the rest of his life because she came between him and his God. So
Mhm.
we have Sauls in the church, we have Davids in the church, and the Davids are being exposed right now. I believe that we're seeing a David generation, and they're picking up their slings, they're picking up their stones, and they're like, bring me a giant. Just bring him to me.
You know what I love about David? When I first started reading about David and like seriously starting to study his life and his ascension to from where he was as a shepherd, and then he defeats Goliath. Well, then he's in an exile period for a while because Saul is trying to kill him. And you know where he got all of his fighters? They were all like literally misfits. They were the bankrupt people, they were the depressed people. They like literally that's how the Bible describes them. They like didn't want they basically like didn't want to live. They were just like, "Oh, I guess I'll just follow David." Like that was like their absolute last resort in life. So look what God, you know what is funny too because this whole story it's like be aware of who you're following to me, right? Because it's like God can take you from literally you're being listed in one chapter as like a depressed and anxious person, and in another chapter you're going to be listed as part of his band of warriors, right? These are the same people. There wasn't like another group that came about. These were the same ones. It says that David taught those ones how to shoot a stone within a hair's breadth, how to make the mark within a hair's breadth of away. And these were like total like non-warriors. These were like nobody wanted to be with them. They didn't even want to be with them, right? Like them own selves didn't want to be with them. They were like, I'm sick of life. And so, it's like that's what God can do. And when you follow and step into that place, when you see somebody who's been tried and true. Like he didn't care. He knew that it was God who let him defeat the bear and the lion that ultimately led him to defeat Goliath. He already knew that. His faith was still there. We know this because he wrote many psalms while he was running away from Saul. He wrote
Mhm.
many psalms, and they always start out like, "Oh, you've left me. Why are you leaving me?" And then like they end with like, I love you, and I will still hope in you, and I will still see the salvation of the Lord. I know that this is coming to me. Like this is still my portion. And he wrote like this for like 7 years. He was on the run. For years and years and years, he was writing this kind of style, and never did his faith get weary. Imagine being one of the people following him, and seeing that he had the opportunity to kill Saul twice and didn't do it.
Yeah, and well, he's even three times he had that
3 times.
opportunity, and he would cut his robe.
Twice in the cave, yeah, you're right, and then once with the water bottle.
And the Lord told him, "Touch not mine anointed." That's the heart
Yeah,
of David. See, this is so
yeah,
amazing to me because you're right. First off, David was in the cave of Adullam. He was hiding out when God brings him all the rejects, all the misfits, all
yeah.
of the people that they were looking for someone to help them. They were not looking to be
They
warriors.
needed a new identity. Yeah,
Yes,
they weren't looking to yes, exactly, they wanted they weren't looking to be warriors. They were like, "Just probably, like, feed me and, give me the things that I need." Like, that's it. That's all I
exactly.
want. I just want the handout. Yeah.
And then they come there, and can you imagine David's idea or response? God, you
Mhm.
anointed me to be king. Now I'm running for my life. I've got the king and the army of your army that's after me to kill me. And now you're going to bring me all of these needy people who need me to take care of them.
Yeah.
God, what are you doing to me? And so, I mean, this was such an awful place in the natural.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
God
Yeah.
literally, he saw the heart of the people. So he drove the ones that had the right heart around David. These are the same men that one day David says, I'm thirsty. And these men get up, they go across the enemy
Yes.
lines just to get him something to drink because they were so moved by this man named David. So it's such an amazing story. So then God takes
Hmm.
those people, those are the very ones. So when David went out against Goliath, he took 5 stones. Well, it wasn't like David was thinking, oh, what if I miss? I mean, he, like you said, he taught him how to shoot a stone within a hair. So it's not like he was afraid of missing. It's not like he thought that it was going to take 5 shots to kill Goliath. But there were 4 more giants of notice within the region. I think David went out and he saw Goliath. He's like, I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to go kill the other 4 if God will let me.
Hmm.
But God didn't
Hmm.
let him. It was the
Hmm.
same misfits that came to him at the cave of Adullam. It was the same downtrodden, the same depressed, the same beat up, the same discouraged men that came to him at Adullam. They're the ones that went out and killed the other 4. So God is literally
Hmm.
raising up a generation right now that's saying, we're not moved by what we see. Matter of fact, we're motivated. We're
Yeah.
not depressed over
Yes.
what we see. We're enraged over what we see. We have righteous
Hmm.
indignation rising up over the fact that we have over 60 million babies that have been brutally murdered in our nation legally. We should be righteously indignant over the fact that our government within the last 2 months has now released funds to other nations around the world to brutally murder babies. We should be righteously indignant that we are trying to indoctrinate children on a early education level to see things that are not normal as being normal. We should be enraged that morality and that a view of God, that all of these things are being trying to be erased from our society. It should enrage us with righteous indignation, because this is a nation that made covenant with God. Our forefathers, before it was even a nation and when it became a
Yeah.
nation, they made covenant with God Almighty. They didn't make covenant with Buddha. They didn't make covenant with Allah. They didn't make covenant with the thousands or millions of gods that people will serve. They made covenant with the one true God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, Yahweh. That's the one they made covenant with. And the church needs to rise up and see that we still have covenant with our God Almighty.
That is so good, Justin. You know, Kent Christmas spoke about this really briefly in one of his sermons, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, where he said, God chose Israel. God chose the country Israel, but America chose God.
Yes.
That's why God is so faithful to America, because he said, oh, I chose these ones and they didn't even want to follow me. And I've had been trying to convince them to follow me. These ones over here are like, no, we want to choose you. God cannot help but shift his gaze and look his eyes on a country like that. And you're exactly right. He's still honoring the prayers that were prayed over this nation, and that covenant that was made hundreds of years ago is still in existence. It's a covenant is outside of time. It moves the eternal realm into this natural one, but it starts eternally. A covenant started eternally. It's moving something from the eternal into this natural time-bound world, and it's still speaking. God is still
Wow.
looking. You know, that's yeah, this is why God loves this country. And if you'll ever notice, wherever whatever America does in terms of Israel, they're always bound in the spirit anyway. The nations have destinies. Every kind of thing has a destiny. Every single thing. God doesn't ever make anything and is like, who cares what happens with that? He always has a destiny for everything he creates, and we should steward every single thing that way with his vision for it, you know? And yeah, so I love what Kent said, like God sees like this place chose him first.
Mm-hmm. The Iran has always called Israel or America, the big Satan, and Israel, the little Satan. We're always
Hmm.
joined together with Israel, and
Yeah.
in terms of around the world. So we look, and I love how Kent said that because God literally birthed Israel, and that was the only nation he ever birthed like that. And there's only two
Mm.
nations that have covenant with God. God made covenant with Israel, and America made covenant with God. That means that as long as there is a remnant in America, a remnant in Israel, those two nations, God will always move on their behalf. But the more that
Hmm.
we allow those things to take over, the more we allow the unrighteousness to come in, the less that remnant has. Now, and I want to say this because there's nations around the world that have, I mean, there's a remnant in every single nation. Actually, a couple of years ago, I was driving down the road. I was not doing anything spiritual or prophetic. I was actually going to pick up a part at the hardware store, and I see North Korea and South Korea, and there was a
Mm.
bubble over North Korea. And I'm just driving down the road. I'm debating on whether to pass the person in front of me because they were going slow. And all of a sudden I have this image of a map and I see this dome over
Wow.
North Korea, and I saw fires begin to break out all in this dome. This has been about 4 years ago, and I see this dome disappear, and then I saw a territory that was called Korea, not North and South, just Korea. And I
Wow.
literally had chills. This is in the middle of summer, and I had chills for the next 30 minutes. And so there
Mm.
are every single nation around the world has a remnant,
Yeah.
and God has a destiny and a plan for that remnant. So when I talk about, or when we talk about the covenant that America has with God, that's not exclusive in the sense of oh, God's not going to move in Iran, or God's not going to move in North Korea, or
Yes.
God's not going to move here or there. No, God's moving around the world. This is a global
Yeah.
move of God that is about to be released. You know, you can go to foreign nations right now and see mass healings and mass deliverances because they believe and they're desperate. So there has
Yeah.
to be a level of desperation to see that massive move. There has to be
Hmm.
a point that you cannot rely on something else. You can't rely on a pill or a shot that's going to save your life. You've got to
Mm.
rely on the spirit of the one true God. So when you go into a village in India and you tell someone who's sick that God can heal, matter of fact, we were in India it's been about 10, 12 years ago now, but there was a person that was very, very ill and terminal illness, and they went to a Muslim excuse me, a Hindu priest, and the Hindu priest said, "You're going to have to go see one of the Christians because we can't do anything with this." So instead, they went
Wow.
to a Muslim. And the Muslim said, "You're going to have to go to one of the Christians. We can't do anything with this." So finally, the person came to the Christians, came to a pastor, and said, "Look, we've been to the doctors, we've been to the Hindus, we've been to the Muslims. No one can help us. What can you do?" And this humble pastor says, "I can't do anything, but my God can." And they prayed for this
Mm.
young woman, and she was healed instantly of a terminal illness because they were desperate enough to believe that God could. Well, the church needs to get desperate again. The church needs to get back to the
Mhm.
place that we know God can. Not only is God able, but God is willing. God wants to move. He wants to heal cancer. He wants to heal corona. I cannot imagine how angry God is at
Yeah.
coronavirus. To me
Yep.
personally, I cannot imagine how angry he is. If my belief is correct, and this is a biological weapon that was designed in a lab and released as a weapon, then can you imagine when God looks, it would be like somebody shooting at your children. I mean, if somebody was shooting at my children, well, I'd be in jail. So when God looks at his children and he sees a weapon
Yeah.
designed to hurt, can you imagine how angry he becomes? We need to understand that God is not passive in any way, shape, or form. He is on his throne right now, and he is convening in the courts of heaven and releasing new verdicts every day. And he is waiting. I was praying a few weeks ago, and I literally saw this mass angelic army just in the clouds, hunched over the clouds, waiting for the command to be released to war on behalf of the church. I believe the angel armies are about to be released to war on behalf of the church, to war on behalf of believers. And it's not going to be just because some mega church pastor got up with a 10 million viewership and got up and said something. No, it's going to be the little grandmother praying in her closet. It's going to be the young man and the young woman that lay out all of their addictions and just sit down and say, God, do something in me. It's going to be the small church over here, the big church over there. It doesn't matter about the numbers or the size. It's going to be about those that will turn their ears to hear from the Lord. And God says, that one I can do something with. That one, that's a David. That may be a Saul, but that one's a David.
I love that, Justin. That's so good. I think you're completely right about how God feels, because it's not only, if you ever have a child who's sick, it's not just that illness is that you're mad at. It's the effects of what that illness is doing. The child is isolated. The child has to be hooked up to cords or machines. It's all of the other side effects. And that's exactly you were talking about going after the root cause of things earlier. And this is exactly what it is. It is, while we need to go after the root cause, there's also the side effects that God is seeing, like the fact that we've been isolated, the fact that there's been churches that have gotten, shut down. There's places that can't have worship that want to have worship, but they can't do it. There's all types of things happening that is also fuel for God's wrath. Revelations talks about bowls being filled up, and one of them is the bowls of the prayers of the saints, and they're getting filled up with the prayers. And the other one is the bowls of the wrath that of the Lord that's coming out to be poured out upon judgment, and that bowl is being filled up with sins, transgressions against the Lord and against his body, that is waiting to get filled up. So we have to understand, I think you're exactly right about God. God is never passive. There's not anything about him that's passive, but he does have order. Yes. And I think part of what might seem to be a delay, which I certainly do not think that. I think God is right on time, but it is so that it's mercy towards his church to get them ready for the thing that's coming. It's mercy to get them ready to steward their blessings, to get their lives in order, to have this extra buffer of time to do whatever it is in their individual lives and church communities that needs to get done, in order to be ready for the next season. God doesn't just give you, 2 days of summertime and then move you into 9 months of winter. God has an order to all of the things so that you're prepared for whatever is coming next. And if you're in tune with the Lord, you know the times and the seasons and how to get ready for the next thing.
I think that there's so much working in tandem right now. So, okay, you have God who, you're right. I don't think this is a delay. Part of it, I think, is the mercy of God for his church, like you said. And then there's another part. I believe that God is literally drawing the enemy into that valley of war.
Yeah.
He's drawing the enemy into his defeat. He's the one that puts the hook in the mouth of Gog and Magog and draws them to the valley of war. I believe that God actually put the hook in Goliath's mouth and drew him to the valley of Elah. I believe that God allows the enemies to come to that place because he's given a defeat. As long as he knows he has a David that's about to come out and slay the giant, then he'll bring the giant down to war. So I went to start a service a few weeks ago, and I felt like the Lord says, I've drawn a line in the sand. And it wasn't like this idea of, okay, I've drawn this line, don't you cross it. It wasn't like that. It wasn't even like God announced it to the enemy. He just draws this line, and he's like, when the enemy crosses, this is his demise. When he crosses it, I'm
Mm.
waiting for him to cross this line because my hand is
Wow, that's
ready.
so good, Justin.
But I'm going to let him get far enough that I will render to him an ultimate defeat. Sometimes we can act too quickly. And God is
Mm.
very patient. And I believe that God is
Hmm.
allowing the enemy to dig his own pit. I believe the God is allowing the enemy to dig his own trap. Matter of fact, I heard Jane Hammond a few weeks ago. She said that when in Judges 4 and 5 in the battle with when Barak comes to Deborah and says, "Do I have the victory in this battle?" So forth. God tells Deborah, He says, "I'm drawing the enemy down to Kishon," and that word Kishon means trap or snare. So literally, God says, "Don't worry about the battle. I'm drawing the enemy to his own defeat." And I believe that that's what we're seeing right now is God is literally, there's part of it that is his patience and mercy to the church where he's crying out to his church, get it right. Get your heart
Mm.
right. It doesn't mean you're perfect,
Mm.
but get your heart aligned to me. And then he's looking at the
Yeah.
enemy and he's saying, come on, I've got something for you. So I think we're living in a great time of victory.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. I'm in complete agreement with you about that as well. Just this morning, we were talking about just kind of some of the events going on in our personal lives. And I said to you, I really feel like it's an opportunity to get the enemy close enough so that you can give him the death blow.
Yes.
The coup de grace, if you will. This is the time. You have to get him close enough though. You can't just hope like, okay, that's far enough. Like get him while he's over there. That isn't how it works because it's not just about one thing. God sees the whole picture. He sees
Mm-hmm.
every single event, every single kind of thing happening all together. And it's not just about like get rid of him when he's over there because the closer he gets, the more stuff is connected.
Mm-hmm.
Think about David's faith, how it grew with the lion and the bear, with Goliath. And as he started becoming very well known for these marauding, victories, he actually ends up becoming, which is so funny, he actually ends up becoming kind of like hired mercenaries, for his enemies. Like, yep, I'll do that. He was so good at warring, but there was a starting point, which was not even with the person, right?
Yep.
It was the first the lion and the bear. And so he starts growing in his faith, and his men's faith too. They had to grow. And it's the same thing with the church. Like if it's always like kept at a distance, we do become that spoiled child who wants every kind of thing waited to us, brought to
Yep.
us, that we're not going to go get it, and we're not going to ever learn how to become able to maintain the boundaries around all of our stuff. It's like we only keep it if somebody's there to guard it for us, and that
Mm-hmm.
person goes away, then all that stuff is lost.
We I don't want to like talk all about David, but David is such an amazing man. So when he talks about the lion and the bear, it's plural. He says, I've killed lions and I've killed bears.
Wow.
That
Come
means
on.
that for those years as a shepherd boy, he's somewhere between 14 to 16 years old at this point. So he has fought
Yeah.
multiple bears, multiple
Wow.
lions, and he's learned how to kill them with a slingshot. I mean, this guy was a beast as a teenager, and he was such an humble person. So then God takes him through this process. He kills Goliath, and he becomes Saul's musician because he's the only one that can defeat the demonic spirit tormenting Saul. And then he becomes the enemy of Saul. So now he's running for his life in the wilderness. He spends somewhere in the neighborhood of about 14 years in this process of running and being a mercenary. So in that first part, he's running from life, and then he becomes the mercenary, which is just like you said, it's hilarious. And so
Yeah.
his very enemy is funding him, and then at the
Yeah.
end of this story, he comes through, and the enemy comes and says, "We can't use you anymore. We just found out who you are. You're the one who
Yeah.
killed Goliath, so you're
Uh-huh.
fired." So then he's bringing his men home. They just lost their jobs. This is the only source of income that they have is they're warring on behalf of the Philistines, and they're coming home, and now their village has been burned. Their wives and children have been kidnapped.
Yes.
They've lost everything. So, and then his own men say that they start whispering and murmuring that they should stone him. They basically are calling him a Jonah. Let's throw him off the ship. And so David, this is where faith is the substance of things hoped for. This is where his faith becomes visible. This is where it becomes substantial. David, he doesn't look at the people and say, please don't kill me. He doesn't debate with them. Instead, he goes and gets the prayer shawl, covers himself with the prayer shawl, goes to his knees and says, God, what would you have me do? Do we have the victory over the enemy? He's not even concerned about his right-hand men that want to kill him right now. He's not even concerned about what might happen. He's not moaning and groaning, oh God, what are we going to do now? We've lost our wives. We've lost our children. We've lost all of our stuff. No, he's saying, God, you tell me, do we have the victory? What a different man. This is not the man that was hiding in the cave of Adullam. He found a new cave, and it was the presence of God, and he put that cloak on him. And when he went into that cave, he came out a different man. So the Lord tells him, you've got the victory. So he gets up and he basically tells his guys, hey, y'all shut up. Stop talking about killing me right now. Let's go get our wives back. Let's go get our children back. Matter of fact, let's go pillage the Amalekites and bring back the spoils of war. That's the other thing. When you go through warfare, you've said this to me multiple times over the last few weeks, that the one word has just resonated with me, spoils. When you go to war, the victor always carries the spoils of war. We're in a spiritual battle as a nation. We're in the spiritual battle as individuals. We are in a spiritual battle as a church. And I believe that we are about to carry out the spoils of war.
You know, I love that. And what I actually saw the very last time was that while we are carrying away the spoils of war, the enemy is left carrying away the rubble of war on his back. It's not like they're left neutral. The enemy is forced to carry away the effects of the war on them as well. And it's the rubble of war. And if you've never been in a war zone, there's plenty of that lying all around. Somebody needs to clean it up, which is part of the reconstruction period of Europe after World War II. As somebody had to go in there and clean up all of the effects of having bombs dropped on it all of the time. And so it's like that, you're forced now to clean up your mess is what the devil is forced to do at the end of it. While we're enjoying the spoils over here, the enemy has to do cleanup work over here, literally carrying away the rubble on his back. Something else I want to say, Justin, when you were talking about the thoughts that God has for us and how he was weaving it together, and it's it's something woven. When you were first talking about that, I had a vision of this blanket that was being woven, and I saw that I was covering myself in it, and it was like a shield to me.
Oh,
it was
wow.
like a shield to me. It was like, these are the words that God has spoken about me, and nothing can come up near me because of these words. These are the thoughts that God has about me. And just when you were speaking about David and how he took that ephod and was covered himself in it, because the word says he strengthened himself in the Lord is what it says. It says before he sought the Lord, he strengthened himself in the Lord. And then he asked God for his direction. And it's like, you strengthen yourself in the Lord when you put on the ephod, those words that are woven about you, those thoughts that are woven about you, you go in that place first. And then it's easy to understand what God will say to you, because you know that you're not coming from a place of fear or doubt or frustration or anxiety or whatever. It's like, God, look at all these great thoughts you have about me that are woven all about me and within me. There's nothing that they're so tightly woven, by the way. That ephod was so fine. There's very specific instructions about how to make that one. That was so finely woven, there's not even one space for any kind of thing to come in there. You've got so many good thoughts about me. How could I not have the victory? Show me the strategy.
Those are the prophetic, creative words of God. So when God speaks something about us, that's it. I mean, we literally shield ourselves about the creative word
So
of
good.
God. So when the enemy comes and says, you're a loser, well, no,
Mm,
God said I'm his blessed child. When the
yeah.
enemy says you're an orphan, no, according to Romans 8, the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives inside of me and has empowered me to put to death the work of sin so that I can
Mm,
be a son and a daughter, a joint heir with Christ. So every lie of
mhm,
the enemy is deflected and blocked by the promise of God, by the truth of God. If we put that on like that ephod, if we cover ourselves up with that ephod, with that prayer shawl, which means that our focus needs to be on the presence of God. We need to be a
mhm,
presence
mhm,
focused church where we're
mhm.
focused on entering in. You can't enter into the glory of God. You cannot enter into the presence of God when you're carrying a bunch of baggage. The baggage can't go. So
Mm, so
when
good.
when we're coming in, we need to be so focused on the presence of God that we stop at the door and we say, okay, God, what has to come off so that I can get
Mm,
closer to you? What has to be broken
mhm.
off of me? God, break me. It was Evan Roberts was the young man that was over the Welch revival back in the early 1900s. And he was in a worship service and he heard the worship leader said, "Oh God, break me." So he began to cry out, "Oh God, break me. Oh God, break me." And then he stopped and he said, "Wait, God, what does this mean? Oh God, break me." And over the next year and a half, God began to break Evan Roberts. He would wake him up through the night and he would
Mm,
intercede through the night. And God literally
mm.
broke the religion off of him. He broke
Wow.
the me mentality off of him, and he made him
Mm,
such a sincere heart that all he wanted was the presence of God. Then they would come in and have service, and it was not about a schedule. It was not about a speaker. It was not about anything other than just hosting the presence of
mm.
God. Then they had it literally in a year's time. I think they had like 150,000 people saved. Bars were being shut down. At the
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
prostitution and the bars were the two biggest professions outside of mining because the miners would come down and partake of both. Now they had the
Mm,
miners coming in getting saved. The bars had to shut down because they had no patrons. The prostitutes were coming and getting saved and delivered and working for the revival. I
hallelujah.
mean, that's how
Come
God
on.
works. It's amazing.
I love that story. And was it him? It might have been somebody else, but I believe it was about the same period of time where God also gave him an incredible business mind, where he was able to start a bunch of businesses. He started employing a bunch of people. He would everywhere he traveled, he would employ so many people that
Oh, wow.
they didn't have to do. Yes, Bill Johnson tells this amazing story way better than what I'm doing, but every place he would go, he would call people and raise them up into like their function. So he started tons of businesses because he had this amazing mind for business. And then like he could see which people should be managers, and he would call them to be a manager, and raise them up to fulfill that thing. And he started, and everybody had like a cycle that they would go through, and it was sustainable, so that he would leave and he'd start the whole thing again when as he would travel around. And this is like what it should be. You should um I think it was my pastor last Sunday said only he says what did he say? He said, I wrote it down. It's in my notes. But basically it said you reproduce what you are. Oh yeah, you can teach what you know, but you reproduce what you are. The evidence of
Wow.
who you are is going to be shown in by what you're reproducing. So if you're reproducing people who are like constantly needy, it's an evidence. Like, you reproduce who you are, you reproduce that. Like, this is how reproduction in the natural works as well. There's your genes inside of your baby that comes. And so this, we have to be aware of like what we carry isn't for us, it's for
Mhm.
the reproduction and the growth of the kingdom.
That's why David reproduced mighty men. He
Ooh,
reproduced
that's good.
giant
Yeah.
killers. Um,
Yeah.
God gave you a kind of a revelation on the parable of the talents here about a month ago, 2 months ago.
Mm.
when you were talking about the parable of the talents, you were saying that, the first one was the wicked one, but the other two, literally, they doubled what they had. They reproduced what
Yeah,
they
I
had.
remember that. Yes. Yeah, that's what God said to me. He said that what you're measured by isn't, we in the natural look at stuff and we say, I'm only good if I do that. I'm
Mhm.
only good enough if I do that. And that isn't what God is saying. God says you're successful when you've 100% reproduced what you've been given. Like the guy with the 10, what does he do? He makes 10 more. The guy with the 5, what does he do? He makes 5 more. And the revelation that God was saying to me was, nobody here made, the guy with 10 didn't make 20. He made the fullness he was given. There is a fullness of measure that we're given, and he made that fullness of measure. So did the guy with the 5. The guy with the 5 and the guy with the 10 got the same reward. You
Mhm.
were both well, you both did well. Come on in and enjoy the rewards. That's what was said to him. The one was wicked because he didn't reproduce what he had been given. He went and buried it. He didn't do anything with it. He didn't make any more of what he had been given.
And by the way, that's not about numbers. It's literally about what
It's the fullness.
it's the fullness. Exactly. So,
Yes. Mhm.
like, one church can operate at the fullness of the spirit and the power
Yeah.
of God. It doesn't make them a mega church. It doesn't mean they have to be a mega
Yes.
church. It
Mhm.
literally is, God, what do you have for us as a church? God, what do you have for us as a family? What do you have for me as an individual? And this is so powerful because we need to realize how much God really has woven inside of us and how special we really are.
Yeah.
And so many people look and they think, I have so far to go. Great. We all do. I
Yeah.
mean, none of us are even close to perfection. We won't be until we get to
Mm.
heaven. But
Mhm.
this is not about perfection. It's about, God, how much of your purpose, how much of your spirit can I access and utilize in my life right now? And I think the church is in store. I think the church is in the beginning stages of a very powerful season. I believe that these will be the days called the
Yes.
days of fire, and I think God's fixing to
Yes, the era of
move
fire is what
the
you said.
yeah, the era of fire.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the word that God has released. That's the word
Mhm.
that I believe, and I feel it all over me. And it's no wonder why
Mhm.
we're seeing the demonic attacks against people. It's no wonder why our children,
Mhm.
our adult children, are struggling with drugs and alcohol and
Mm.
homosexuality and
Mm.
perversion. It's no wonder that the number of relationships actually getting married is going down because the value of
Wow.
marriage is not there. It's no
Mm.
wonder we see all these things because there is a kingdom of heaven that is preparing a great move, but there's a kingdom of darkness that thinks it has the victory. And so we're in this in between place where there is a clashing of kingdoms. And yeah, I think it's like you said, God's mercy is on his church right now. He's screaming to his church, align to me, be empowered in this hour,
Yeah.
move back to the place of being impassioned. And I think the church is fixing to not just be set on fire. I think it's going to be ignited in a way we haven't seen before.
That is so good, Justin. I just feel like I want to just speak something out. Some people I feel like maybe are wondering, like, they feel stagnant, but they're not sure like what to do. Like, there is a very great reward in risk right now. So this can be, just ask God, what is it today that you want me to do? And say yes to that. Just say yes to it, whatever it is. Maybe it's go to the grocery store and there's going to be somebody I want you to pray for, or maybe it's spend your lunchtime with me in prayer instead of eating. Who knows? It could be any kind of little thing, it could be a big thing. I have no idea, but I just feel like there's people who are wanting to get back lit on fire. This is how you do it. Like, there's, you say yes to God and just some kind of little thing, he'll show up. He will
Mm-hmm.
show up. He honors the your heart posture, and he honors your desire. Even if you're not, you can maybe say, I'm not hungry, but I want to be hungry. God even honors that. God is looking for, God can do so much more with people who are willing.
Yes.
the willingness, than somebody who's just going to do things by the books of like, I'm going to go to church on every Sunday. I'm going to go to the prayer meeting on Wednesday. And you're just doing it out of habit. It's not like an actual fellowship time. God wants the people who are saying like, I don't go to church every Sunday. I don't go to church every Wednesday. But God, would you make me want to do that? I don't want to do it right now. Can you give me a desire? And he is going to honor that. Just some sort of risk is what I'm sensing, like that word risk right now. There's going to be great reward in it.
I love that because God meets us when we step out in faith. When Joshua was
Yeah.
leading the children of Israel into the promised land, just before they hit Jericho, they had to cross the flood of Jordan. The waters didn't part immediately. They actually
That's
had to
right.
step out in the water, and then the
Mm,
waters parted. Sometimes we have to step out before the waters part, and that's the hard thing. I mean, that's the testing of your faith. Is
that's right.
is when God tells you to do something, and then nothing's happening until after you do it. And sometimes you walk away and go, God, why did you have me do that? But it is a real
Yeah.
testing of our faith, a stretching of our faith. Isaiah
Yeah.
54 says, "Sing, O bear, and sing, enlarge the tents, enlarge your tents, enlarge your boundaries." I believe that God is
Mm,
calling us to enlarge the boundaries of our faith, to stretch our faith
mm,
beyond what it's been. Again, you and I both we work out, and when you work out, you have to push yourself further. And number one,
yeah.
you're looking
Yeah.
for your limits, but that's how you grow. And if
Hmm.
you don't push yourself, if you do the same weight, the same amount of reps, the same amount of sets every time, then yeah, you're exercising. Congratulations, but you're not growing. You're not getting
Hmm.
stronger. You're not improving. You're just
Hmm.
maintaining what you already have. Well, we don't need to maintain anymore. We need to grow.
Yeah.
We need to get stronger. Our faith needs to grow. Our belief needs to grow. Our prayer lives need to grow. Our study lives need to grow.
Mm,
Our hearts need to grow. It's a great time of
mm.
stretching our boundaries.
Yes. That's so good, Justin. What I like about that story you were just telling with Joshua coming to the river is that he had prior to this told God had told Joshua, I'll be with you exactly just as I was with Moses. Exactly. And so with Moses, when he comes to the water, he parted it before they ever got wet. So in but what with Joshua, they had to get wet first.
Hmm.
So he could have had doubt come in and say like he's not doing it exactly like Moses, and he said he would be with me just like he was with Moses. So sometimes being with us doesn't mean it looks exactly the same. That's why it's the 10 and the 5.
I
you
love that.
you your fullness is 5. It doesn't mean that you're less than the person with 10. You made the fullness of what, God was with you the same amount. You were able to reproduce exactly what he wanted you to. He gave you a certain measure. You reproduced the fullness of that measure. And that was the standard. In our minds, the standard is 10. I see 10 over here. The standard for me is also 10, even if I have 5. And to God, we need to decide we need to discover for ourselves what is our measure, because God has put, it says that he's put his treasures in those jars of clay, right? Where those jars of clay, there's different types of treasures in us, and we're not
Hmm.
all the same. He did that on purpose. And so you have to find out for yourself what your treasure is and what your measure is in this case. Like, because it's not going to look exactly the same. Even if you have the blessing of somebody else upon your life, it's not going to look the same way, because God doesn't want to. God is also reproducing himself, and God is endless. So there's going to be an endless amount of ways that he shows his glory, that his kingdom is manifested through us. So it's not going to look the same. One other thing that I heard, somebody interesting thing about this situation. They're about to come over to Jericho. This generation was living up in the wilderness. They didn't see any kind of cities. They've been in the wilderness their whole lives. They had probably never even seen a brick. And yet they're coming over, right? Because other generation had died. And so they're coming over. They see this wall that's so big, they can ride chariots around at the top. Horses, by the way, they don't have horses, okay? And they don't have chariots. They weren't allowed. They never were allowed. And they see horses and chariots riding around the top of this like gigantic. Could you imagine what is going on in their minds at this moment? Like, what are these things? What if they'd never seen a horse, never seen a chariot, never seen a brick, let alone a wall so big that it can have these things driving across it? And they're being told, hey, we're just, what we do? We walk around it is what we do. And we're going to be quiet for 6 of the days. And then one of the days will be real loud. Like that, these people were by no means like warriors. They were not builders. They were not educated people. These were like wilderness babies, right? Like growing up in the wilderness, coming upon this thing. And they're like, okay, sometimes, okay, I want to say this in like a very nice way, because obviously I believe in education and being educated, all the things, right? Ignorance is sometimes your best, like the best thing, because sometimes you're just too ignorant to even know what that is. Like, I have no idea what that is. So the only thing I have is the word of the Lord. At this time, they had no natural knowledge to kind of interfere with like their obedience. They were like, nope, all I have is the word of the Lord. All right, I'll walk around this thing six days and then shout around it the next time I walk around it the 7th day. They were too ignorant to have any knowledge of like, hey, that's real dangerous. There could be archers up there. There could be like all types of things that could be coming over those walls. They like had no idea. They were just too ignorant to even know that they should be afraid of that thing. So they just walked around it.
But here's the funny thing. When Joshua sent spies out, they met with Rahab, and Rahab told the spy, she made room for him, but she said, all the people are afraid of you guys. So, I mean, like you said, they're wilderness babies. Okay. They're not warriors. They were unaware. They were they did not have the knowledge and the understanding of what this city was in front of them, but yet God had released fear in the enemy's camp because they were afraid of these wilderness babies that were fixing to come in. And literally all they did to tear down their greatest defense, all they did was walked around once a day for 6 days. And on the 7th day, they praised God. And their praises, I think when we praise, I think I just lost you. I'm not sure what happened. I think... I'm not sure what happened to our video feed. It looks like something happened on Angel's side. I want to finish this statement, though. This is where God broke through on behalf of the children of Israel. And here we go. Let's see. Are you back? Can you hear me?
I'm back. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I just got told I was kicked off. It said, thanks for joining. And I was like, what? I didn't leave.
Well,
sorry about that.
I still have the split screen up. So all of a sudden my face was right in the middle of the split. And I was like, where did she go?
No.
I'm so glad the rapture did not happen and without me knowing.
Still here. Yeah.
I have that's what my cousin did one time. My cousin came home and his parents weren't home, and he called someone else and they weren't home, and he called someone else and they weren't home. He called my mama, and when my mother answered the phone, he said, "Oh, thank goodness, Aunt Darlene. I knew if you were there, we were okay. I thought the rapture happened." So
oh, that's cute.
but in
you're
that,
right. You were talking about
Yeah, in that story, man, God released fear in the enemy's camp.
Yeah.
I think God is releasing fear in the enemy's camp. I think right now that Satan and the demons and the spirits of wickedness, the principalities and the powers, I think they're terrified because they see that there's been a shaking going on, and God has been shaking his church. And when God does a shaking, the only thing that remains are the things that cannot be shaken. Thanks be to God that we belong to a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Hebrews 12. So here we are, Satan and his imps are seeing a church that cannot be shaken. He's seeing all of the chaff shaken off of the church. He's seeing the narcissism narcissism shaken off. He's seeing the
Mm,
self-centeredness shaken off. He's seeing the victimization
amen.
shaken off. And he says, oh no, there is pure remnant right there. And I believe that
Mm,
that there is fear in the enemy's camp because God is doing something in his church and through his
yeah.
church.
Oh, so good, Justin. I totally agree. I honestly couldn't have said it any better. And I love that you remembered that too, that God had allowed the spirit of fear to just go into the enemy's camp. And that's interesting too, because it's like the thing they tried to release, right? The enemy tried to release that onto the Israelites, and they suffered the consequences of coming into agreement with that, is the exact same thing that's happening right now. Whereas this
It
whole
is.
thing, that's why I said like it's extremely demonic, and it's about fear. Most of all, fear of being sick, fear of being around people, fear of getting too close to each other, fear of any kind of thing. Now I'm going to be afraid to even worship in church because my mouth might release some spit that might make somebody else sick. This whole thing is about fear and not being able to make your own decisions, right? It's about control and
Yep.
manipulation. It's so demonic. The whole thing is terrible. But anyhow, it's the thing that has been released now is coming back to the enemy. That's biblical. There's so many times where God talks about the trap that the enemy has set is the thing that is going to trap his own self. And
Yep.
like we talked about the last podcast, I said, if you believe, which every Christian should, if you believe that the Bible is the word of the Lord, those psalms are the declarations, those are the verdicts of God sitting on his throne. You know what? I've already declared that because the enemy is doing this, this is going to be the punishment for it. I've already declared that. This is my verdict. Declare it now in agreement with me, ecclesia. Read my word out loud. This is why you should also always read your word out loud. You know, you should read the Bible out loud. Every night, you know, when I'm going to bed, this is going to be the last thing that is spoken out in my atmosphere, because I want all of the devil. They can come and watch if they want, like me reading my Bible. That's going to be the last thing that they're going to see before my body goes to sleep. My spirit's going to be very awake in the nighttime, you know, so this, we need to like be more intentional about how we are reading to the word,
Hmm.
like because God's heart is in that.
Absolutely. That is his revelation. That is his rhema. And
Yeah.
when we
Hmm.
release that, I love how you said that last time about it being verdicts because it's so true. But there is a decree and there is a declaration. So a
Yeah.
decree is a legal decision that has been decided, but the declaration is the announcement of it. So God releases his decrees, but when I declare it in my realm of authority, now I'm releasing his decrees with my authority. So my first realm of authority
Yes.
is me, my mind, and my body. My second is my home as the husband and the father of my home. The third is as a pastor of this church, the church,
Mhm.
and then as a member of my city, my state, and my nation. So I'm going to take
Mhm.
the decrees of God and I'm going to declare them. I'm going to announce to the enemy, yes, Satan, I'm aware of what God has already decided, and this is what the verdict is in my life. And that is so powerful when we do that. So you're right. We need to be
Yeah.
intentional. We need to
Yeah.
that's both when we read scripture, but also when God gives a prophetic word. Announce it.
Mhm.
Don't announce it to your enemies. Don't go running out to every person that hates you and go, this is what
Right.
God said to
Of
me.
course.
I hold my prophetic words very dear to my heart. But
Mhm.
when in my prayer
Mhm.
time, I let the devil know, this is what God said. You have nothing. This is what God said over me.
Mhm.
This is what God has said over my family. This is what God has said over my church. And when I'm praying for someone else and God releases a word, I declare that Satan, understand, I declare this is what God has released a verdict in this situation and you cannot stop it.
Yes. So good, Justin. Yeah, I love it. I love all of it.
Well, once again, we have gone 2 hours and I've actually got somewhere I've got to be in just a short
Yes.
time. And
Yep.
is there anything else you want to share before the rapture
No,
hits
I
the
don't think
program
so.
again?
Yeah. No, I think I'm good.
I want to go back and watch that part. I want to see just how
Yeah.
silly I looked when I looked up and you're not there anymore. So
Oh
anyway,
my goodness. Yeah, it just says like, thanks for joining. I was like, oh, did Justin end it? And then I like scroll down. It was like reconnect. I was like, yeah, I want to reconnect then, I guess.
I actually was looking because I have a keypad over here that I used to switch things, and I have not been switching, so it went to sleep.
Oh,
And
oh,
usually I'll go to a single screen with you or a single screen with
yeah.
myself, and I haven't been as paying attention as much to this thing. And so I was like, well, maybe I did that, but no, I haven't touched it. It was still off. So I have
That's
no
so
idea what
funny.
happened. The enemy was tired of us talking, so we picked up right where
Yeah.
we left off. He loses again. Congratulations.
Hallelujah.
So, well, if you don't mind, would you close us out in prayer?
Yes, I would love to. God, I just thank you so much for this time today. God, I thank you so much for Justin, for bringing us together to do this podcast, Lord. I thank you so much for every single one of our viewers, for the people who watch live, for the people who are going to watch the replay. Lord, I pray that this word comes alive to them, that your Holy Spirit would surround them and rest upon them and bring these words to life for them, specifically for them, God. Each one of those individual souls that will hear it, the families that they're connected to, Lord, I pray that you would just breathe upon it and you would show them how these words are applicable to their life, even today, God. I thank you so much that that you are moving, that this is a victorious fight that we are in, that you have already decided the outcome, Lord, that we are just standing to wait and see, the victory of the Lord. And I thank you so much for that, God. Lord, I thank you that you are moving even now, that we can sense the atmosphere changing, that the kingdom of heaven is so close. It's at hand right now, Lord. Help us to give us the wisdom, the spirit of wisdom, to know how to partner with you, to know how to release the kingdom into every single place that we go. God, I pray for your dreams, your visions, your blueprints from heaven, your plans, God, to be released to everybody who is listening to this podcast, who's crying out for more of you, to see kingdom come into a specific area, God. Release those plans to them. Give them wisdom and resources, and the spirit of revelation to show how this will fit into their life and the community that they live in, Lord. Show them how to build these things. Lord, I pray for wisdom to just be built in it, to be in the midst of that building. God, I thank you that we are at a time where we haven't been before. We haven't been this way before. That's what I hear. We haven't been this way before. And I thank you for it, God. And I thank you that you've already planned the way, that all we need to do is to follow you and follow your footsteps. To all we need to do is to walk where you go, Jesus. I thank you so much for making that path apparent. And I thank you that no matter what it looks like, that we have the heart to say yes to you. I just bless every single person who's listening to this. I thank you for them, Lord. I pray that you would protect them. I put the blood of Jesus upon them and around them. And I just pray that your will is done in their lives the rest of this week. And until next time, we thank you, Jesus. We thank you for the opportunity to do this podcast. And we just give praise to your name through it. Amen.
Amen and amen. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. We'll be
Yes.
back at the end of, what is this, April? We'll be back at the end of May with the Vaulting Voices. Please connect with both of us. I actually have been getting some weird friend requests on Facebook, so I'm not accepting everybody on Facebook,
Yeah.
especially the ones I'm getting people who don't look like they're real. So anyway,
Yeah.
you can connect with us on social media. Our links are in the description. Check out our church's YouTube channel. We have multiple videos. Check out
Yes.
Angel's YouTube channel. She actually has a monthly worship time as well that she's doing at her church, which is a time of prayer and worship that is just absolutely fantastic. So
Mm.
just look at all the resources. We have so much available to us nowadays, and
Yeah.
I'm thankful that we do. And so if you'll connect with us on those different platforms, we would appreciate that. And until next time, God bless you, and we will see you then.